mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 5, Episode 10, the Season 5 finale of Hulu's The Handmaid's Tale, entitled Safe. Now, I feel like this episode title is like ironically named because I feel like nobody ends this episode safe. Luke and Nick are arrested. Janine is being taken. We don't know where. She's being taken to the colonies. She could be taken. She could be taken to a nice place to hang out. June's on a train headed west, but nothing felt safe about that trip. Moira's not even safe because if she's still in that same house, everybody don't know she gone. They might throw a Molotov cocktail through that bitch, thinking that June is still like nobody is safe now. But before I get into the episode, I do want to give a quick reminder, especially since this is the finale. So there's not going to be any more Handmaid's Tale episodes on this channel until season 6, the final season. I do want to give you guys a reminder to follow me on social media at One Mic Network on Twitter, as you can see in the chyron below. And then you can search One Mic on Facebook to follow me on there. I'm going to share news, things that are coming up, anything that's important information for you guys, but is not fit for a whole ass video. Now that this is over, this being Handmaid's Tale, this kind of leaves a little bit of an opening in my scheduling. Things are going to pick up real fucking soon, but this does leave a little bit of an opening. There's going to be, if you want to join the Patreon, there's going to be a Mike's Musings coming out pretty soon. That's where I talk about shows that I watch, but I don't cover on this channel. I figure after I watch Andor tonight, it'll probably be a good time for me to do another Mike's Musing, so that's coming soon. So if you're interested in joining the Patreon, there's a link in the episode description below, and there's also a video called Major Announcement. That's all the information on the Patreon. And then lastly, before I actually get started, I do want to give a shout out to my patrons, as this is the final Handmaid's Tale video. So I want to give a shout out to them: Delvin Cox, Brett Factual, Dez, Justin Smith-Williams, Brian Turner, Dancing Lights, Margaret Moffett, Esther Blount, and Adam Weiss. So, like I said, strange kind of episode title, feels very ironic, but talking about this episode, this was a finale that I think is kind of a good comparison to the season as a whole. It was solid. It was serviceable. I left it without too many complaints, but I didn't leave it like, man, that was fucking great. And that's kind of how I feel about this season as a whole. Like, it was serviceable. It was good at times. It had very few things that I didn't like or things that I questioned, but I didn't really come out of any episode really feeling like, man, that one kicked my ass, or that was that knocked my socks off. And, this season feels as a whole kind of like that. Like, it was serviceable. It wasn't great. It wasn't bad. It was solid. It was good. I enjoyed it. But at no point was I like, wow, this shit's really fucking kicking my teeth in right now. So, but that's how I look at this season as a whole. But, this episode did have a lot of stuff that I did like, that I do want to talk about. Some things that I think it did that I feel is really interesting. But it did have a couple of things that kind of left me with like the confused Nick Young meme face, like that gif. That's kind of what it left me with for a little bit. So this episode opens with June being delivered a bulletproof vest via Amazon Prime, same day air, arriving between 2 and 6 if you order within the next 45 minutes. Like, she got that bulletproof vest quick. Can't say I blame her. If I almost got shot, at a public event saying the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd probably get a bulletproof vest pretty quickly too, especially if I know it's for me, if it's meant for me. And let me just add, and this is gonna be, if you're that dumb person who said they had to unsubscribe from my channel because I got political on a video about The Handmaid's Tale, like literally like the most political show ever created, short of like The West Wing. And dude thought I was got too political or whatever. It's like, I have to unfollow. Like, I give a fuck. But I know this is gonna be like, I don't know, too political. But like, is there a more American way? Is there a more American way to die than getting shot at a public event reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? Like, I can't think of a more American way to die. But of course, June's not gonna want to go out that way, so she gets the bulletproof vest. Fair enough, right? But now I think is a good time for me to introduce one of the moments that had me kind of like making the Nick Young face at my screen. And Nick talks to Commander Lawrence, and he accuses Commander Lawrence of being behind the attempt on June's life. The attempt being the shooting that during the Pledge of Allegiance, the end of the last episode. And Lawrence says he wasn't, and that June isn't a target, but like from an official Gilead perspective, which essentially means the exact opposite, that she is a target. But like, I like how he doesn't directly admit any Gilead involvement or his own involvement, but he frames the attempt in like this way of like, a lot of people don't like her. Anybody might try to shoot her. Like, shit happens. People may want to kill her. What do you want me to say? And like, that does kind of admit involvement. But what made me make the Nick Young face at this situation is, I guess, is like, is ordering something like that. Well, I don't know how you can frame it as a question. Ordering something like that doesn't seem to be in line with what the behavior that we've seen from Commander Lawrence up to this point. And I'm wondering if it's less that he was behind the even the attack on the attack on the people who came to get Hannah out of the school. Like, if he wasn't behind that, if he wasn't behind this shooting, if he wasn't shooting attempt, if he wasn't behind the car incident that we're going to talk about a little bit later, if it's less about him being directly involved and more about him being complicit, and it's maybe like it's Commander Lawrence, Commander McKenzie who's behind these things. And my only concern with that really is I don't think the show has shown me enough to really get me to know that Commander McKenzie is the one placing these orders, placing these orders, makes like he's in a fucking restaurant, giving these orders, and Commander Lawrence knows about them, is complicit, and doesn't say anything because he's already in like a bad light from a Gilead perspective, right? But I don't think the show has shown me enough for me to make that connection. So the scene just kind of comes off as like Commander Lawrence is doing these things or is behind these things, that he's just playing dumb. And it's kind of like a thing where like, we both know this needed to happen, but obviously I can't say it out loud in front of you. Like, it comes off that way, but that kind of flies in the face of what we've seen. I mean, this is a guy who was like putting his neck on the line in earlier seasons to help these women. And now I'm expected to believe that he's gonna blatantly call for attempts on her life. Like, I don't really buy that. I completely buy McKenzie doing it and Lawrence having to go along with it to save face or to prevent himself from looking worse in the eyes of the other commanders than he currently does. I totally can get that. But I just believe that the show hasn't quite given me enough of that. So those scenes, though, when I say those scenes, I'm referring to the scenes between Nick and Commander Lawrence. Those scenes came off like, this isn't what Commander Lawrence would do. And that, like, again, it's kind of a minor thing because I do feel like there was enough there for me to even infer that he might just simply be complicit in Commander McKenzie's actions. But I would have liked to see a little bit more on the screen. But again, that's me kind of being nitpicky at the same time too. So not a huge deal. But regardless, I do think the show has gotten a smidge messy with Commander Lawrence. You know, like I said, he was an ally at the start of the show's run, putting himself at risk to help these women. Even this season, his words have continued to be that of an ally. The show has only done enough to make me question his authenticity. Like, is he really trying to help? Does he really want to help June get back with Hannah? Or is he working an angle? But in this episode, they made it almost kind of like overtly have him say, like, I'm behind this. And I do think, again, I think it's very plausible, if not the case, that he's not behind this, but he's complicit in it. But I feel like the show in this episode kind of made him look like he was directly behind it. And that's not the Commander Lawrence that we've seen. And we've seen nothing to suggest that the same guy who put his neck on the line to help all these women in earlier seasons would now do something like this to make multiple attempts on June's life in such violent ways. There's nothing that's happened to make me think that he would flip. So like I think there's more work to be done, or the more work that should have been done to provide a little bit more clarity to Commander Lawrence's motivations, or maybe give us more time with Commander Mackenzie. I don't know, but again, just a little bit of a nitpick, but I felt a little bit of a way about it. Speaking of strange character decisions and motivations, that seems to have been kind of a theme of this season. We've seen Aunt Lydia go from what I believe to be the show's clear #1 villain in the earlier seasons to, I'd say now, a good guy. Like, she's kind of making the face turn here. And I think the show, I called into question whether or not they've done a good enough job with convincing me that Commander Lawrence could be behind these sorts of things, or even convincing me that Commander Mackenzie's doing it and Lawrence helping, whatever. I think the show has done a good job with Aunt Lydia's arc. And that's because with Aunt Lydia, any action that she takes is feasible for that character as long as we stick to the core principle of Aunt Lydia, which is no matter what she does, whether it's completely shitty or great, no matter what she does, from her perspective, she believes, and this is important. It doesn't matter whether or not that's the case. All that matters is that she believes that everything she's doing is in the best interest of the handmaids. And when you have that, you can have that character do something shitty and then in the next scene do something great. And it's not, obviously the show doesn't do that. The show is put in the work to move Lydia to this place that she's in by the end of this season. But like, you can have that turn on a dime kind of feeling. The same thing I just complained about with Commander Lawrence. You can have that as long as her central focus is like, she believes that she's doing what's best for these women. So I think they're doing a great job with Lydia here. And as long as the show keeps letting us believe that that's Lydia's driving force, they can pretty much they can make sense out of any action that she does, because she's always gonna have the same motive. So I think really good stuff with her there. I do think they stretched the plausibility of Lydia's face turn a little bit with how cool she was with them singing Hard Knock Life while they were cleaning. Like, that just seemed like a bit too much. Like, the way she was like smiling before she entered the room, and she's all like, oh, God ain't got no problem with you singing while you do your slave labor, but maybe you should sing a better hymn. Like, okay, like, I'm gonna get diabetes with how cute she's trying to be right now, but how sweet she's trying to be right now. But whatever, right? But Lydia's told that it is noticed that she is giving some preferential treatment to Janine. So because of this, a plan is put into motion to have Janine be posted in Commander Lawrence's house. And Janine is like, she's understandably not cool with this, but in my opinion, this really is the best case scenario. She can be with Angela, her actual daughter. Speaking of, like, we'll leave Miss Putnam alone for now, but trying to clarify that that's her daughter, like that is a indisputably factually inaccurate statement. Like, this is my daughter. There is no way you can do any kind of mental gymnastics to make that true. So for her to say that so firmly was ridiculous to me. But I get it. It fits within the show. So it's just me being picky about language. But yeah, she gets to be around Angela, and she probably wouldn't even have to do no ceremony, because Commander Lawrence don't really do that shit. So like, she's not even gonna have to worry about the sexual aspect of it. It really just seems like we're giving you a place to stay, which works for you, and then having a handmaid in this house with a wife, it works for Commander Lawrence for his perception and how he looks. So like, it seems very win-win to me. But Janine is opposed to it, and I definitely get that. But I like the fact that she showed opposition, but at the end of the day, because of the hard sell on Lydia's part, she did go along with it. And she's super amicable about it. Like, very like, yes, ma'am, yes, I'm cool with that. Anything you say, great. Until one of two things happen that change her mindset. It could be one or two things. It could be both things. But the first thing is she learns that Angela is at her grandparents' house, Angela's grandparents' house, which would be the Putnam's parents, one of the Putnam's parents, for the whole summer. And her and Lydia both make kind of like disgruntled faces in response to this. And my thought was she there the whole time? Or was that a decision that was made after it was basically presented to Miss Putnam? Like, look, I mean, at the end of the day, it was presented like an option, but really, Janine gonna be moving in here, so that's just what it is, right? Was the decision for Angela to go stay the summer with her grandparents made after the Janine conversation, or was she already gone? Because I think it's something that can add to the anger that I think that both of them felt in that moment. If they both think like, wait a minute, Angela was here before, and now she's gone after you were told that I was going to be living here. Like, come on. And then the other thing is that after Janine learns about what happened to June, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, yeah, but I can't help but assume that when she was told what happened to June, and the Martha that was talking to her said, I wrote the quote down, they never let anyone get away, fuckers. I feel like that had to have been the moment when the reality really hit home for Janine. And I think, though, the straw that broke the camel's back was when Miss Putnam referred to her as a friendly face and called her of Joseph. And Janine tells Miss Putnam how she really feels in this scene, talking about she hates her and all this kind of stuff. Like, you gotta know I hate you, right? And the next time we see Janine, she's being taken away in cuffs while Lydia objects. Lydia gets pushed down by one of the eyes, and it looks like it's gonna be, like I said, really bad for Janine, and possibly pretty bad for Lydia as well. So we'll see where that goes, but I'm on board with like let's say Janine gets taken to the colonies, a Lydia trying to like get Janine out of the colonies or out of Gilead or whatever the case may be, or saving her from being hanged, whatever. I'm on board with Lydia saving Janine. Totally on board with that. I feel like over the course of these 5 years, 5 seasons, the show has earned a Lydia and Janine good relationship. And it's amazing considering where they started, that we could end up where we're at, and what I'm proposing for season 6, and it's plausible and it makes sense and you can accept it. So that's good work on their part as far as, working with the Lydia and Janine relationship. But I mentioned, after what happened to June, that might be one of the things that broke Janine. And so let's talk about what happened to June. Mark arrives at the house of June, Luke, and Moira to tell them that the shooter from the end of the last episode, from the Pledge of Allegiance scene, was apprehended. And he's just basically some rando guy, right? And June walks into his car when he leaves, and while she's out there, she's seeing like people moving. Like, they do like this 360 shot of the neighborhood, and you see like stuff out on the lawns, you see moving trucks, and people are just like, yo, I've had enough of this shit, right? And as she's standing in the middle of a truck, she ends up in the middle of a truck. As she's standing in the middle of a street, she gets hit by a truck on purpose, and then the truck runs over her arm. I gasped in the middle of the plum market. That I was watching this scene. I did not see that coming at all. And then Luke comes out and beats the shit out of this guy. And I want to take a brief moment to divert here. I feel like this is the ultimate redemption for Luke, because I don't really pay too much attention to the Handmaid's Tale fandom, and that's not to say that I have an issue with it. It's just not something that's on my radar. My spare time is dedicated to this, so I don't really know like the temperature of the fandom as it pertains to Luke. But I assume there's one of two positions. I mean, that the fandom is on. It's either like Luke's inaction during the time when Hannah and June were in Gilead is understandable because he's putting himself at risk. He has no way to know where they're at, what to do. He go over there, get all the logical reasons where it's like, okay, Luke's inaction is justifiable and makes sense, pro Luke. And then you have I'm assuming again, another group that's like, Luke just let his wife and daughter be taken away and he ain't do shit, and he just chilled in Canada the whole time, not doing shit, reading on the fucking internet, and not going over there and manning up and risking himself to save his family. So I'm assuming those are the two places that you can land on as it pertains to Luke. And I feel like if you're on the anti-Luke side, this should have been his redemption. Because if you were of the belief that he was in the wrong for not putting himself at risk to save his family, well, that's just what the fuck he did at the end of this episode. So I do feel like this is a redemption situation for Luke. So he beats the shit out of this guy. The guy ends up dying. And now Canada, who's already sick of refugees from Gilead, wants him arrested. They're no acceptance for here. Luke's got to go. So him and June and Nicole try to leave to go to the airport. And it sounded like they were going to go to Hawaii, which I thought was interesting. But Mark pulls up and he tells them that you ain't going to make it out the airport. So I'm going to get you on this train that's headed west. That should work for you guys. Now, again, I'm making the Nick Young meme face in this moment because, not in the moment I just described, in the one I'm about to describe. And they get to the train station, the police are looking for Luke. And I'm like, how do they even know he's there? But I also think it's feasible that Canada could be like, we need to arrest Luke Banco, and he could be within any number of places, and they probably sent guys to any train station, bus station, or airport within a certain mile radius of wherever their house was. So it's plausible that they could be there looking for him. But it felt like they knew he was going to be there, and I'm wondering if that's something that's going to come into play next season. But I do want to go back for a moment now, and I want to talk about Nick, because, like I said at the beginning, he accuses Commander Lawrence of being behind this shooting. And after Lawrence gives an answer that kind of suggests that he was, Nick seems to have a change of heart about not helping Mark. Because we know Mark asked Nick to help him out, and Nick's like, I got my family to take care. Actually, June asked Nick. Mark sent June to ask him. And he's like, I got my own family to take care of. And he shoots it down. And I think after an attempt's made on June's life, this is what prompts him to have this change of heart about not helping Mark. And he makes a deal with Mark that he has to sign. We don't know what his side of the deal is. Apparently, Mark's half of the deal was allowing him to see June, but presumably Nick's half it could be just something vague like help out. But it might be something more specific like, I don't know, anything. Give us this kind of information about Gilead, whatever. But he agreed to do it because of what happened to June after the arm incident. Side note on that, it was wise to have Nick at the hospital at a different time than Luke, because Luke was clearly on some real shit, and he might have put hands on Nick too, and I'd have fully been in support of that. But after June does get hit by the car, Nick, after he visits her in the hospital or whatever, he just rolls right up in Lawrence's wedding and cocks him. The pause. We'll just say hits him right in front of all the other commanders, saying that June could have been killed. And he's then arrested. And Rose, his wife Rose, comes in and she's done with him, which I think is an interesting turn of events, because I just mentioned last week with her being pregnant and them mentioning that, like, oh, what if the kid has some sort of genetic issue? And I'm like, well, if her father is powerful enough to protect her despite whatever issues she might be having, why wouldn't he be powerful enough to protect the kid? But now, if it's in a position where Nick is no longer in their good graces, what reason would the father have to protect Nick? He could be in really bad shape. So this arrest could mean the end of Nick. But I don't know. We'll see. I love the line when she says a good man wouldn't leave his pregnant wife every time his girlfriend calls. I said, hell yeah, you tell this punk motherfucker, Rose. And it helps me realize that I'm not the only person that realizes that Nick is a wife fucking piece of shit. Like it's like, okay, yeah, he leaves his wife every time his girlfriend calls. Like, that's just the latest offense. Like, let's not forget this guy was fucking somebody's wife in season 1. Like, let's not even forget that. But I want to wrap up by talking about the strange closing scene, because I thought this scene was weird for me. More specifically, June's reaction. Not even June specifically. Both of their reactions to seeing each other on this train, I thought was kind of odd. So June gets on the train with Nicole after Luke implores them to leave without him. He turns himself in, puts his hands up, arrest me, I'm good. And they get on the train, and they hear another crying baby. They go to check it out, and it's Serena and Noah. Surprise, surprise. I guess that person who picked Serena up did not turn around and take her back to the Wheelers, but instead helped her out. And Serena asks for a diaper, like, you got a diaper? And June makes this devilish face back. And that's how the episode ends. And it almost had like a comedic tone to it that just did not work for me. It came off like two old friends up to their old tricks again. Let's see what new adventures they're gonna get into. And I'm like, these two hate each other. Like, what are we doing right now? Like, June was very clear that the only reason she helped Serena was because her baby didn't deserve to die in a barn. And she also made it very clear that she only did it because she was being the bigger person. Like, I'm not gonna let Gilead turn me into somebody as shitty as you that would make me do some shitty Serena-like stuff to you. I'm better than that. I'm bigger than that. I'm better than you. I'm more Christian than you. So I'm not gonna do all that shit. And the last time we saw them together, June was advising her to just like, hey, pretend to be a good handmaid or whatever while secretly plotting your revenge. Bye. And now the next logical scene, the next time those two should see each other, it should not be what we saw. Like, there's a lot of scenes missing in between plot revenge on the Wheelers and all these smiles and smirks that happen on this train at the end. That, like, there's a lot of scenes that would have to be in the middle of that to get me to buy the smirks at the end. And even worse, I'd be more excited about them being stuck together with each other, because they do kind of have like they do have to hang together now because they don't know anybody else. They both know each other. They both got babies to take care of. Well, baby for Serena, toddler, we'll say for June. But it does make sense for them to stick together, and I would like that. I do like that, them having to be together wherever this train situation is gonna go. But I like it more if it was kind of like, fuck, now I gotta work with this bitch. Like, if that was the vibe, I'm all for it. I'm like, oh man, they're gonna have to work together, but they hate each other. I'd be for that, way over this like time for mischief kind of vibe that they did. Like, what the fuck was that? Like, got any diapers? Time for mischief. Like, what the fuck was that? That was so strange to me. I just did not buy that. But either way, I'm still on board for whatever crazy adventures they're gonna get into. And yeah, like I said, really solid finale, solid episode, solid season. It wasn't great, if I'm being honest. This isn't gonna make my top 10, or probably not even my honorable mentions, if I'm being honest. Because at the end of the day, I never came out of an episode of this show feeling like, wow, this shit knocked my socks off. This season. No, I've definitely come out of an episode of a show feeling like that, but not this season. So a couple of quick thoughts before I wrap up. What happened to the New Bethlehem storyline? Is that even a thing anymore? Or have we just moved on to like, I'm going to have June killed and I'm just going to live in my house with Miss Putnam and Janine and fuck New Bethlehem. Like, that doesn't the New Bethlehem shit seem like a loose thread? Like, I'm not tripping, right? And then the scene where everyone is like all peaceful and June's like drinking her coffee and she's like, Nicole slept in, and everyone's like, oh, this is so nice. And then Mark knocks on the door and June makes this fucking like so angry face at the camera. If you've been here, you know how sick I am of that shit. That one almost felt like a troll that was meant just for me. Like, they've heard me complaining about it. We're like, let's have him like she looked at the mirror, like, not in the mirror, in the camera, like, this for you, one Mike. Like that face, like, I felt like I was being trolled in that moment. It was so overt that I'm just like, yo, the show must be fucking with me with this lame ass fucking thing that they do 10 times an episode. I'm glad to have the time in between seasons where we ain't got to do the close-up of June's face 17 times an episode as if it's the most profound fucking shot in the history of cinema. Like, gonna be so glad to not have to deal with that. So, that's it. Let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments. We'll chop it up with whatever comments I can chop it up with. I'll see you guys next season for season 6, the final season. Make sure you hang around. I'm covering the peripheral. I still have the season finale of Atlanta, and then we're gonna have Yellowstone, Tulsa King, and White Lotus are all gonna be like Sunday shows that I'm gonna be covering. I got a retro review coming out for Dark City for those of you who are patrons. I got a Mike's Musings coming for the patrons. I just posted a fight talk for the patrons. So all kinds of content. If you're not sick of me, there's ways you can just have a flooding of content. And I'll see you guys next season for episode 6 or on Thursday/Friday for Atlanta and Peripheral. And until then, peace.